Welcome, everybody, to a Seminole Sidelines, a special Friday edition as you get set for your weekend. It's always a great week to talk about the Noles. Arya Masudi, Pat Burnham, Charles Fishbein, Kurt Weiler, the Osceola crew here to bring you all the news from the week, and this show will be pretty fun. We're going to talk about some of the big news of the week, obviously, but it's not going to be just football-centric. We'll talk, obviously, the Noles on the gridiron. We'll talk some recruiting, too. Fish is here and Pat's here to break that down for us. A big weekend coming for Mike Norvell and Junior Day in Tallahassee. And then, of course, we'll talk some hoops. I think we need to talk some Baba Miller coming back for Leonard Hamilton's Noles and Tania Latson, who continues to take the college basketball world by storm. Another 30-point-plus performance against NC State, and Brooke Wyckoff's Noles take down 11th-ranked Wolfpack last night in Tallahassee. So we've got an action-packed show, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get right to it. Pat, Jared Verse returns. He comes back. I think everybody was waiting in anticipation. Jared kept everyone on pins and needles, it felt like. You had these cryptic messages coming, eyeball emojis everywhere, and we were like, make your decision already. But he made the news that I think everybody was hoping for in Garnet and Gold. He's back in Tallahassee, and what a big addition it is.
Yeah, certainly the biggest retention, addition, signing, whatever you want to term it, on the defensive side of the ball for sure. Probably bigger than any prospect that was signed in 2023. Having Jared Verse back next year certainly gives Florida State to have one of the most dominant fronts in the ACC when you look across the front four. And, of course, having him back, his playmaking ability, really, I think he surpassed all our expectations coming into this year. Everybody expected him to be Jermaine Johnson. We kind of tempered expectations, but certainly had a productive year and as big a get for Florida State as any that they brought in, any new guys that they brought in for sure.
Fish, well, what were your thoughts when you saw Verse was coming back? Because, you've been keeping tabs on the guys they're trying to bring in to join the program. They've been looking in the transfer portal, but a lot of that was contingent on what Jared Verse would do. And in the end, the Noles get their best pass rusher back.
Yeah, I know the word was coming back that he was coming back, or people thought he was coming back. I just didn't think it was possible. I mean, you look, he's in the top 20 in college football in sacks, with 9 overall. I mean, the top guy, Tuli Tuipulotu from USC, had 13.5 sacks. So anytime somebody can rush the passer and has that ability to put pressure on the quarterback, those guys are unicorns even at the NFL level. I really thought this is like landing a 5-star recruit with him coming back.
Kurt, coming to you. This is for Florida State, a team that has a lot of expectations next year, right? Defensively, though, I think a lot of people want to see them take that step forward, having some of these names that decided to come back. I love it that we already had heard about deciding to return to FSU, but now to get a Jared Verse. This defense should, in theory, take that next step forward because of what it has coming back.
Yeah, especially with, how they've kind of supplemented the few losses they've had through the transfer portal fairly well. I think the thing with Jared Verse, too, is the stats are up there. He had an impactful season. I'm not sure he ever kind of hit 100% again all the way after that injury at Louisville. He was able to play. He was able to be productive. I don't think he was kind of at his peak. I think coming back, if he enters next year 100% healthy, we saw the LSU game. I don't think he ever really had another game like that. Maybe the bowl game. But, yeah, I think, another offseason in the strength and conditioning program, not that he's a guy who needs a ton of that. He already, looks the part, but I think can only help. And I think, a healthy season, will make a major difference for the Florida State defense. They would have been in a tougher situation, especially entering a season with expectations if they were having to replace guys like Jared and Fabian.
You know what's interesting too, fellas? I think we all talk about Jared coming back, but a lot of people thought he could be an NFL draft prospect. For Fish and Pat, what ended up being the main reason that you think he decided to come back? And when he got his draft evaluation back in his hands, what do you think they wanted to see him work on to become that first-round pick?
I'm not sure what they wanted to see him work on, but I think probably 2 things factored in his decision to come back. Obviously, whatever he got back from the NFL certainly had an influence. At the end of the day, money talks. So, whatever they gave him back, he thought it was better to try to come back, have another great season, improve his stock, go a little bit higher, and get more guaranteed money. And then, of course, I think it helped that Florida State is on the upward trend at 10-3, and obviously winning makes playing college football a lot of fun. College is a unique experience, and I think he wanted to see where this program can go one more year. And so I think it was a combination of those two things.
Yeah, I just think consistency for game in, game out, play in, play out. Most of the time, pro scouts want to see you play hard on every down. It's not, sometimes guys take plays off. I'm not saying that's what Verse did, but there were moments where he was injured in certain games and you didn't see 110% effort on certain plays. So playing with more consistency, dominating game in and game out. There were moments in the Florida game and also in the Oklahoma game where he didn't look 100%. But like I said, these guys are hard to find. It's really fortunate for FSU that they were able to keep somebody that is so good at rushing the passer. That's a specialty. There's not a lot of those guys. Pat's been around a few of them at USF. Florida State's been fortunate to have a great history of defensive ends. Verse is about as talented as they come. As far as athletically and what he can do, how he could set the edge, help in the run game. You saw when he was out, just like it was with Lovett, they weren't as effective. They don't really had a second guy last year. Peyton started to come on at the end, but even he is really just more of a situational guy. Verse could do both, help against the run and also the pass. Those guys are hard to find, and that's why getting him back is so huge.
Yeah, and if you're Patrick Payton and whoever else is playing on the opposite side of Jared Verse, you should thank him for coming back because your number is going to be much better than they would have been otherwise.
Exactly.
Without a doubt. Kurt, I do think something new that's kind of popped up the last couple of years, obviously the NIL, the Battle's End doing what they've been able to do. Touch on just the game changer that's become for FSU, having those collectives and the impact that's had on keeping some of these guys in Tallahassee rather than them deciding to maybe start their pro careers.
I mean, that is a game changer, definitely, in today's day and age, where I'm not saying that there wasn't any situations where you may have persuaded guys to come back for an extra season and maybe have them get a bit of money before the NIL era. I think we all know stuff like that was happening. But yeah, to be able to have it public, I think is a big deal because it is guaranteed money that, I mean, can negate some of kind of the risks that these guys are taking by coming back and kind of by delaying that professional career, whatever that might be for them. And yeah, the Battle's End, I mean, the led by CEO Ingram Smith has, I think, been a game changer. I think Florida State's NIL is in as good a place as it's been. And meanwhile, Florida's, I would say, is not. We don't have to dwell on that, but Florida's kind of a mess in that regard right now. And Florida State's not, which I think is a bit of an inverse kind of from how we thought things were for a while there with kind of the NIL in the state of Florida.
For Fish and Pat, both of you have been around this game a while, and you've seen just the way that it's evolved, right? How do you get kids to school? How you keep kids in school? Are we going to start seeing maybe some of these, I don't want to say fringe draft prospects, but guys who are not surefire first or second round picks? Where we've seen in the past, they decide to go and start their pro careers, whether that's, their group or their corner tells them, hey, just go have a good pro day, go have a good combine, and start your career. Are we going to start seeing a lot of these players come back to their schools because of these collectives and these NILs rather than starting their careers?
Yeah, listen, I think that you will. Obviously, you're going to go where the money's at, right? So if you're going to be a 5th to 7th round draft pick, and I don't know what those guys make, but I know there's some guys in college football these days that are making more than those guys. So certainly you would take that money for a year. And listen, the NIL has changed. It's going to be a game changer. You got guys. There's going to be guys that play in college football. They're going to make more money in the 4 or 5 years in salary playing college football than they will their first job out of college. So it is a game changer. It will keep kids in school a year longer. And it's going to be fascinating to see if there's any guardrails put on the NIL and the transfer portal. But certainly you can be assured that on every college campus that has the ability to afford an aggressive NIL program, they are keeping players on campus for an additional year, at least some of them.
Yeah, no doubt. It should help keep some of these guys on board. Pat, you were bringing up that the NCAA is going to put some guardrails up. I think they did just come out with the rule yesterday or the day before with transfers as far as that there is going to be a one-time transfer, but anything after that, they're going to have to show proof through they're going to have to write stuff out and explain why they're leaving that school. So I think the one-time transfer is now in place, and it's going to hold unless you're a graduate transfer. It's going to basically go to that. But yeah, I mean, anytime you could get money from a program and like these guys, but I'd still, like I've told you guys before, I still think there's that guaranteed money at the NFL. A lot of these guys have to get to that second contract to ever really see value in them, because the rookie deals, once you get past the top 15 picks, is not that great. So a lot of these guys do want to get to that second contract. So I think you'll see more guys stay, but you'll still see a lot of guys leaving early because they feel, hey, I want to get that money. I want to get onto it. And a lot of guys don't want to still stay in school. You still have to go to class. It may seem like they're not student athletes anymore, but there is still a lot of stuff outside of football you have to do when you're on campus. And not a lot of kids want to go to class. Not a lot of them want to go to school. They want to get on and get paid and get their career started.
Speaking of some big names, boys, that they decided to come to Florida State. Jared Verse returns, but then Florida State hits in the transfer portal. South Carolina, the jokes are running around. It's Florida State's JV team. It's Florida State's G League team. It's the minor league team. I even saw some South Carolina fans going, I can't hate FSU. We're their minor league team. What's in the water in Columbia for Mike Norvell? What did Coach Beamer do to this program to piss him off? But more importantly, what does Gilber Edmond mean to Florida State and to that defensive line and that depth that now the Noles have there?
Well, from my perspective, I don't know what the hell's going up in Columbia, but it's benefiting Florida State with Jaheim Bell and Gilber Edmond, and I guess several other guys. We had Turntine this year. It was from South Carolina.
Jamie Robinson a few years back.
Jamie Robinson, yeah. So it's South Carolina
last year.
South Carolina has been good to Florida State. There's no doubt about that. But listen, obviously he brings in a guy that can come in and be a part of your two deep right away, probably push for a starting job. I did notice today on the roster for Florida State, they've now officially listed Dennis Briggs back out as a defensive end. So listen, it's gonna be interesting, but certainly just on body type alone, he kind of reminds me a little bit more of Peyton than he does Verse or Briggs. So I think he would be a guy that's probably going to line up on the same side that Peyton does, and those guys will be fighting for reps. But certainly I think it gives you, with the guys they have at defensive end and Verse coming back, I think it gives you 4 starting caliber players at defensive end to start with, and you don't know how the other kids behind them are going to develop. So you might have more than a 4-man rotation at defensive end if you get some development, and who knows, they may not be done yet.
Yeah, I mean, I see Edmond kind of in between a McClendon and a Peyton. I think he's a little better against the run. He can hold up against the run a little better than Peyton has so far. You can see when he gets up the field, he knows how to contain. He knows how to not get broken down one-on-one with a running back or a receiver in space. So he gives you something against the run. I don't think he's as explosive as Peyton as far as a pass rusher. He's a little step behind, but I think he's a little better than McClendon. So he's in between those two. I think he's more of a backup guy that can contribute, give you some starter minutes just in case one of those guys go down. But I definitely think anytime you could add that type of depth on the defensive line, it's a plus. I've always said take as many offensive and defensive linemen and just don't worry about it. Just rotate them. The best teams rotate guys in and out. I mean, I don't care if it's Georgia, Alabama, the teams that you're trying to chase to get to the playoffs. The reason that they're there is that when they roll out their second and third team units, those guys, there's not that much of a drop off. Once FSU gets to that spot, like last year, they struggled when Verse and Lovett went down, that if they can make that gap closer, they'll be a lot better on defense. It'll take pressure off their secondary. They could do more stuff in coverage in the back end. Pat could give you more of that technical side more than I can, but it does. It helps you out a lot when you have those guys up front that could constantly put pressure, wear out an offensive line by rolling bodies in. They've done a great job. This guy just adds more to that depth, and he's another important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, nothing personal against Leonard. Nothing personal against Leonard Warner, but bringing Gilber Edmond to replace Leonard Warner, who was kind of your 4th defensive end this year, is a definite upgrade. I mean, he was a guy who started at South Carolina, was very impactful at South Carolina. I think, Fish nailed it with saying if you're not bringing in a star, you didn't have, especially once Jared returned, you didn't have the need for like a Jermaine Johnson or a Jared Verse like you did the last two off seasons, that really impactful high ceiling guy. You needed that quality depth if you're going to compete in the ACC, if you're going to maybe even do more than that. So yeah, no, I think it's huge and you beat out LSU, you beat out Florida, you beat out Ole Miss, you beat out some programs that wanted him. And I mean, some may have been able to sell playing time more than you, or like a definite starting spot more than you.
Yeah, and listen, he's a guy that can run, and we all saw the issues with contain against Oklahoma, and he's a guy that can negate that to some extent. He can recover. He does do a good job of closing down on runs, staying square to the line of scrimmage, and then a good change of direction. And was actually athletic enough at South Carolina. You go back and watch the Clemson game, and they actually line him up on 3rd and long as an inside linebacker where he's going to drop into pass coverage. And, of course, we've seen FSU use their ends in pass coverage, so he's got some experience doing that. So, yeah, I think it's a heck of a get for Florida State, and a position that needed immediate help as far as starter or two deep quality players.
Did you guys see the question from Dan Squatch? We'll pop it back on here. Thanks for asking via YouTube. You guys kind of touched on it, but I guess I'll rephrase the question in terms of with Pat Payton and McClendon in there. How does Florida State best utilize all three of those guys? And really, I mean, you could have Verse too. It seems like the versatility and Fisk as well, right? Fisk can get out
and do Briggs. There's boys, guys that are going to want to play next year. There's no doubt about that.
So how do they best utilize these guys?
I just think you don't worry about how you're going to utilize them. It's all, every guy's going to be utilized differently. I mean, Briggs is a bigger guy, so if they play a team like a Clemson or whatever, and you want a little more size on the defensive end, that edge side, to help stop that run game, or like they did against Oklahoma, you could go bigger on the D line. Then you play the teams like the Wake Forests and stuff. You slide Briggs inside where he can help you a little more there. I just think that they have a lot of versatility with these guys. I don't really think, Verse is an edge guy. That's what he's going to do. Patrick Payton's the edge guy. But guys like Frisk and also Briggs, those guys are versatile enough. I think that, Frisk, from what I saw in film, and I don't know how Pat feels about this, I saw him more of a strong side defensive end. I don't think he's truly 300 pounds. He could be. He looked more like he was in the 275, 280. So if they go to 3-man front, you want to move Frisk outside. Then you have the rush edge guys like a Verse, maybe a Peyton with their hands up. You can do some stuff with the 3-man or odd-man front, do some things that are differently. Listen, they have a lot of versatility. That's not something you see a lot, especially with defensive linemen. A lot of times they're pegged at one position. But these guys across the board can do so many things. And, that's what makes this defensive line so special heading into next year.
While I got Fish still here, I know we've got a couple more minutes with Charles Fishbein. So here's what we'll do. Got some different topics here. We want to hit on recruiting because this weekend's big for Florida State. And we've always kind of talked about the success you have as a program doesn't necessarily help you the most with the current class, right, that you're trying to convince. It's the one that comes after. And So now it begins for FSU this weekend on trying to snag some of those top kids from 2024. So let's talk some recruiting, and then maybe we talk about after that, Pat. We'll talk about Pat Surtain joining Florida State and what that means for the Seminoles. So, all right, so you got Junior Day coming up here on Saturday. Fish, can you give us a little bit of a preview of what to expect and some top names that are coming in Tallahassee?
I think what you expect is you want to get the bigger name kids on campus. One thing I learned from coaches, they always feel that if you could get a kid on campus 3 times before their senior year or going into those summer months, that gives you an ability of landing these kids. You want to get them on campus multiple times. This will be the first time for many of these guys, so they'll have extra junior days, extra time in spring football and through the summer. So a guy like Charles Lester, here's a kid that's one of the top corners on their board. He likes FSU a lot. He's a key, important piece. Anytime you could get a shutdown corner, a guy that could shut down half the side of the field, you could do so much up front. You could do different things with your secondary. He gives you that ability to do so many things on the back end. He's a plus. He's someone I think that they need to get a commitment from early, mainly because there's been a little drop-off in the defensive back recruiting the last year and a half. They've been a little unlucky with one guy not coming, another kid transferring out. Lester would alleviate some of those issues, especially with a guy like the Cypress kid that came in from Virginia. He's not going to be here much longer, maybe a year, maybe two tops. So a kid like Lester is a guy that you're going to have for 3 years. He's an impact player, a guy that could come in and play right away. Maybe he doesn't start, but he could give you depth and provide you some size and length. There's some other guys, the Dante Robinson kid. I just was talking about coming on multiple visits. He was here last summer, so this will be at least his second time on campus. He's a big guy. Florida State needs to get bigger. The one thing I think we saw both in the Florida game and the Oklahoma game is the size differential. And people are like, oh, we're a big team. Florida State's not a big team. They just aren't compared to these SEC teams and some of these Big 12 teams. They got to get bigger. Dante Robinson is a grown man. These are guys that are already physically big before they come on campus. Listen, I don't care how good your strength program is. You can't just have every guy need to be developed physically where it takes 2 to 3 years. Guys like the Dante Robinson kid from Orlando Jones, he's 6'5", 290 pounds. He looks just different when he walks on campus. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about Hakeem Williams. Hakeem Williams is already physically developed. So when he gets into that college weight program, it may only take him 6 months or the offseason to get where he needs to be, where he's physically and mentally capable of playing as a freshman. So those are just some of the guys. I think the Jonathan Daniels kid, he's another big kid out of Pensacola. I like that they're bringing this kid in. I've talked about it. I thought Florida State needed to do a better job in Pensacola. If you go look at the last 10 years, Florida State hasn't hit. The last couple years, all of a sudden, they bring in a Jabril Rawls. They brought in Darius Washington. Now you want to get to that next level. Jonathan Daniels is a 4-star offensive lineman. He's big. He's physical. He's athletic. He's a guy that I think that they could get an early commitment from. One of the local kids, and I think Florida State needs to do better locally, that it would really help them, is Mekhi Danzy. Here's a kid that they offered last summer, did really well. Me and Jerry got to see him in the state championship game. I don't know if he's a running back. He may be a Lavernius Coles type. Lavernius was a running back in high school, converted a wide receiver. I see a lot of the same similarities. Danzy's a kid that I thought maybe he could play running back, but then you watch him in the state championship game. He's always trying to kick everything outside. He's not a between the tackles guy, but he has different level speed. Florida State needs playmakers, as does every team. I think he's one of those guys, too, that can really help open up the offense, create those deep downfield plays that can continue to do what Florida State's done. Like they were one of the top teams with more than 20-plus yard plays. Guys like Dancy will continue that success. And there's some other guys coming in this weekend. Ashton Hampton, his father was a coach at Florida State at one time, not that long ago. And there's going to be other guys. Kobe Howard's a kid. I'm interested to see what happens with him. He was having a really good offseason last year in a camp circuit, went to the Miami camp. I think he either tore his ACL or he hurt his knee. He didn't get to play that much this year. It's going to be interesting to see how he develops and physically gets back. But they got some good players. They got to continue to get these big-time players on campus. The one thing is, and I try to tell everything, getting to 8-9 wins and what Norvell did, that's what you expect at Florida State. But once those expectations raise, you want to get to that 11-12 win season, you have to take the high school recruiting to another level. You have to get more Hakeem Williams. It's not about – I know everybody wants to talk about development. Listen, you watch Georgia the other night. They do develop those kids, but those kids came in already super, super talented. So you want to get more of those top-end kids. I'm not saying they're going to get 25, 30 of them, but if you could get 5, 6 guys a class that are just difference makers, all of a sudden 10 wins goes to possibly 12 wins, and you have a shot not only to make the playoffs but compete in those playoffs.
No, and I agree with Fish. I think the more you win, the more you'll have a chance to develop from the high school level and bring those kind of kids in. And we talked about it in every staff room I've ever been in. You can have all the gimmicks and bells and whistles you want, but what kids want to do is they want to win. You can put on 30 different color helmets, but if you don't win, those kids aren't coming. So, and you see it right now. I believe there's 5 4-stars in this group that'll be on campus this weekend that we are aware of. Fish mentioned the size difference that we've seen against Florida and LSU as far as linemen and Oklahoma. And They've addressed that. They're addressing that issue now. They've offered 3 offensive linemen in the last 24 hours, none smaller than 6'6", and one a legit 6'8", one a legit 6'7", based on what you see on film, and all impressive guys. So, I just got a text that Mike Norvell just landed in Stark, Florida, in a helicopter. So they are out on the road right now, as Fish said, trying to leverage this 10-3 season, and keep strike while the iron's hot. And but yeah, certainly, Aria, that the 10-win season, the winning certainly changes who you can recruit, and then of course now coupled with a good NIL program. So I think the best days are ahead for Florida State and Mike Norvell as it pertains to recruiting in high schools, and obviously the state of Florida.
To jump off topic real quick, Kurt, just real quick, because it popped in my head when you said Stark, Florida. Is that where they do executions in the state of Florida? Am I on to something here?
Yes,
did I see that right?
You were asking the wrong person.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's where they executed Bundy. That's just all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
And it's also where one of the worst speed traps in the entire state of Florida is, right there on 301.
My thing is,
they will give you a ticket for going 2 miles over the speed limit.
Pat, why would I know where Stark, Florida is otherwise?
I don't know.
Well, LaTroy Gwynn came from Stark, so I mean,
it says Rayford. It says Rayford for Bundy, by the way. I don't know if that's right by Stark or
it's
Rayford.
I believe it's Ray. I think
maybe I should have paid attention during the national special.
Who thought we'd work Ted Bundy into?
This is what we pay. Why they pay me to bring in nonsensical, unrelated things.
Hey, we're gonna handle some pop culture stuff too, I guess.
I don't know if that's pop culture. That was like the 90s.
Yeah.
Fish, last thing before we let you run, and again, we'll pass this around the panel. Pat Surtain, expected to be hired for Florida State as its DB coach. Marcus Woodson headed to Arkansas. Fish, from the recruiting standpoint, what does this mean to Florida State and what Pat has done in South Florida in his time in American Heritage too?
Yeah, I mean, I had to make some calls. Like I've said on the message boards, I didn't really have that relationship with Pat Surtain that I had with other coaches, not because he's not a nice guy. The way that Heritage is and a lot of the private schools are, they have guys that handle recruiting. Pat kind of did his own thing when people came on campus, even head coaches. So I really never got to really sit down like I have with a Roger Harriet at St. Thomas or some of these other coaches. So I didn't want to just go out there and say, hey, this guy's a great recruit. I really didn't know, as far as talking to some college coaches and high school coaches that have dealt with Pat. They have very high remarks about him and his ability. We don't know what he's going to do recruiting, but from a personality standpoint, recruiting has nothing to do with coaching. Pat can tell you that. There's some of these guys that are great recruiters that can't coach a lick, but they can go out and get players. So recruiting and going out there and being able to bring these guys on campus and land them has a lot to do with more than just coaching. A lot of these guys want to be coached up, yes, but you got to be a salesperson. So everything I've heard about Pat is he's very likable. Kids like him. He's very well respected. He has contacts at all these schools. He's connected to these other high schools. But there's always going to be those coaches too. He did take a lot of kids from other programs that, he's going to have to, fix those bridges and make sure that he makes those guys happy. Because like I said, sometimes people take a lot of things personal in this business, and Pat can tell you that, guys hold grudges over the dumbest things, but it happens. It looks like on paper it's a great hire, and we'll see. I mean, like I said, you really don't know until he hits the road and what we see on the field. I wasn't one of these guys that thought Marcus Woodson all of a sudden became a bad coach and recruiter. I just think things got a little sideways with him, and you had to move in another direction. It had nothing to do with him personally. I think a lot of it is just timing too. Florida State is rising, so it should be easier for someone like Pat to sell Florida State. He's going to go into these schools and have they were talking about what they were going to do for 2 years. And until kids see it and until these high school coaches see it, it's all talk. They proved it on the field this year. So I think Pat's going to have an easy sell going in with that Florida State. Let's understand one thing. That Florida State logo, and there's only so many of them, and Pat could tell you this because he was at USF. It gets you to the front of the line. Nope. It doesn't mean you're going to land a kid, but it gives you that, like when you walk into a school and you have that Florida State logo on, it stops a kid. Whether it's Florida State and Alabama, when you're at USF and Pat was at USF, you had to go and be at the back of the line and be behind these. That's called recruiting. It's hard to do at those schools. And when you land a kid, it's impressive. But
whether no matter how good a recruiter you are or how bad a recruiter you are, when you have that logo, that Seminole head on your shirt when you walk into that school, you're better than you think you are.
You're much better. You hold a big stick when you walk in with that Florida State shirt. I'm not saying it's going to land you kids, but at least it gets you in the door, and it's kids have interest right away. And Florida State's a brand. We've talked about it before. They're a brand. Kids know what it's all about. They've seen it on TV. So it gives Pat great leverage now to go into these schools with that. And he's going to be at the front of the line. And now he's just got to sell the product and he has to close. There's a lot of guys that could get in that door. It's the closing part that's the difficult part.
And let's be real. I think we've talked about the importance of the season Florida State just had. I would say I doubt Pat Surtain is joining the staff last year, coming off a 5-win season. I think you had to kind of sell proof of concept to him that he might not want to, as a first-time college coach, jump into a potential hot seat situation like that. So yeah, I think it's another area where I think your season you just had helped you out, and I think he has the chance to be, a home run. I think if he coaches, I know he doesn't have kind of experience beyond the high school level, but he coaches half as well as he played himself as a longtime NFL DB. I think, and plus, South Florida ties, Louisiana ties from, he went to actually Greedy Vance's high school. So he's got ties all over the place. And I think, you would think it's going to work out really well.
Yeah. I would assume he's got a relationship with David Johnson because David was at Edna Carr for a while as well. And listen, Kurt's right. There's no guarantee that great players don't always make great coaches, but everything we've heard about Patrick Surtain has been positive. He's a guy that certainly has the practical experience as a player, certainly has been coached to the nth degree as a player. And listen, he spent this past season with the Miami Dolphins as a defensive assistant. Probably a little bit more position-specific training being there as opposed to being the head coach at American Heritage. You would think that would benefit him too. But certainly a hire you got to be excited about. As Fish said, he's got relationships down there in South Florida. If he was taking players from other schools, he will have to kind of soothe those things over. But that does happen. It happens everywhere anymore. But coaches do hold grudges. But anyway, yeah, certainly seems like a great hire. He's a great player. And if he's half as good a coach as he was a player, Florida State will have a tremendous guy on their staff.
Well, big for Florida State. They get Surtain in the folds, and you've got, again, on paper, I think it sounds about as good as any other hire you could have got. Looks like, is it Nick Monroe's headed to Minnesota per some reports? That's a pretty good hire for Minnesota. I know, Fish, you know Monroe a little bit.
Yeah, I spoke to him yesterday. From my understanding, he did interview at Florida State. He was one of the guys that interviewed. They went in a different direction. Nick's a great coach and a recruiter. I've known him for a long time. Anytime you could go into a school when you're at Western Michigan, like I said, he would try to fight with the big dogs. He landed a lot of Power 5 kids at Western Michigan when he was at not Western Michigan, but Bowling Green. Now he goes and coaches with Nick, with PJ. I think they have kind of similar personalities. I think he's a good fit there. It's probably the best. They're gonna have, like I said, their personalities are very similar. So I think that will be a successful combination with those two.
They're both elite people.
That's awesome. Well, Fish, appreciate you, man. Insightful as always. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hope to see you next week sometime on the show as well.
For sure, I'm there.
All right, moving on here on the show as Charles Fishbein bids us adieu. I think we should stay on the topic of football. There were a couple of other things I wanted to touch on. We touched on the portal a little bit, but I do think we need to also touch on some of the departures as well, right? Treshaun Ward commits to Kansas State now that we know Malik McClain has entered the portal. Kurt, we'll start with you, and then Pat, feel free to just jump in right after. What do these losses mean for FSU? And at the end of the day, it seems like everyone understands why they made the decisions that those two made.
I mean, you don't want to sell it. I mean, their losses to varying degrees. I mean, Treshaun's a guy who I think was your second leading running back each of the last 2 years. He was the feature guy, really. He was the most heavily used guy until he got hurt this season. And I think when you looked at him in the Oklahoma game, his kind of FSU finale, if you will, was kind of the perfect example of, I think there were certain games and certain defenses where he was kind of the best running back fit. Trey Benson never really got going against Oklahoma, and Treshaun Ward with his patience and I mean how quickly he could, when the hole was there, he would hit it and things like that. I think he's a heck of a running back and a great story to go from, I mean, a walk-on betting on himself to established guy who was kind of a coveted transfer, obviously landed at Kansas State. It's a good problem to have. I mean, the thing is, if you're Florida State, it's a good problem to have kind of more guys probably worthy of reps than reps to go around. Because even if all three had come back next year, even if Treshaun comes back along with Lawrence Toafili and Trey Benson, then you probably got Rodney Hill kind of wondering, well, what is my role in all this? Because he redshirted last year, and I think a lot of people see him as a potential major future contributor as soon as next season. I think Treshaun's absence kind of opens things up for him. Malik's. If you told me a year ago that Malik was entering the transfer portal this year, I probably would have been really worried about that. Definitely more worried than I am, just from a standpoint of, I think he was a very high upside guy in an unproven room, but you had so many guys emerge. And I think, I mean, adding even a Hakeem Williams, what you saw from Kentron Portier, I think the potential of a Deuce Spann, and then obviously Johnny Wilson, the season he had. Malik had some really great moments and I think could be great somewhere else. And it's hard to blame him for wanting to go be a featured guy somewhere else. And I mean, what kind of out of nowhere became a pretty crowded wide receiver room.
Yeah, and just touching on Treshaun, listen, I think that people had a lot of respect for him. He chose to come to Florida State as a preferred walk-on as opposed to taking a scholarship. He kind of won people over with his effort, the way he played. And we were talking about this last night on another call. Listen, if Treshaun had not got hurt, we're maybe talking about somebody else transferring out and not Treshaun. Could it be Trey or Rodney? And we talked about the fact that there's not going to be enough footballs to go around next year. And Kurt brought up the running back room with Toafili, and then we had me talk about the fact that Jaheim Bell is going to get some carries more than likely, like he did at South Carolina. Now, how they use him, we'll have to see. But and listen, there's other factors. The portal played a factor in this. NIL. There's lots of factors involved in transfers that we are experiencing for the first time. But, if Treshaun's goal is to be one of the top two backs in an offense, there's no guarantee that was going to happen here, right? I mean, as we said, Rodney Hill's impressed everybody. Benson has been unstoppable at times. Toafili is kind of a special dude in that he can do a lot of different things. He's very versatile. And then, of course, you bring in Jaheim Bell, and you've seen, we've been impressed with C.J. Campbell and some of those other guys. But so I think probably a lot of things went into his decision. But I also think that when these kids have one last shot left and you have a crowded room like the running back room did, you certainly cannot blame him for going to a place where he's going to be one of the top two guys and have a chance to enhance his attraction or attractiveness to the NFL. But certainly a guy that we all liked watching, appreciated his effort. And I'm sure Florida State fans were sad to see go, but it's the new era of college football. We're going to see these things happen each and every year with the transfer portal, NIL. And then, of course, Malik showed a lot of promise at different times in his career. And obviously they did turn over the entire wide receiver room, and you got a lot of numbers there. And everybody expects Hakeem to come in here and compete right away. And, we've seen what kind of player Darian Williamson can be when he is healthy. So again, how many you got? One football and about 25 guys that feel like they deserve multiple opportunities to catch that ball. We haven't even talked about Kyle Morlock and Biscuit and some of these other guys that are continue to get better or have not even gotten the program yet. So I think it's just how there's so many things that are involved in a decision for a player to transfer. But certainly Malik is a guy that I think will continue to get better as a college football player. You wish him the best, but certainly, if he had left last year instead of this year, it would have had a bigger impact. It's a little with Micah and Johnny and some of the other guys they've got receiver and some of the guys they're bringing in, it was a little bit easier to take with him leaving. But certainly he was a kid that was fun to watch, and you wish him the best.
Yeah, I think I'm going to miss Treshaun Ward a lot. You know, the way he ran against Oklahoma, and he had some big moments this season, and especially last season. Remember when he kind of warmed the hearts of Seminole fans with the way he came, and his story's so good, right? Former walk-on that gets a shot to be a scholarship player, and he makes the most of it. And I think both of you said it perfectly, right? You summarized it. There's only so many carries. You're not going to tell Trey Benson that he's going to get less carries. And you kind of had a safety, a net in Toafili with the way that he runs. And, of course, I thought even Campbell had run well at times, and so did Hill. So you're good in that area. And then McClain, we say there's only so many carries. There's only so many passes to go around as well. And it sucks to lose Malik McClain because I do believe McClain has NFL potential. I think he's a guy you could see if it all comes together, you see him playing on Sundays. And we saw flashes of that at times. But like you guys said, it's a loaded room. It's a good problem to have. And I think more importantly, when you reach this level as a program, and if Florida State wants to continue, right, to ascend into that echelon of Bama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, roster turnover is inevitable. Very talented kids are going to decide that they want more opportunities elsewhere. And that's not a bad thing. You just gotta have to embrace that.
And the portal's here to stay, and it's going to work both ways.
Right.
I mean, Florida State has been very successful on being on the good end of most of the portal things. We're going to find out that that may not always be the case. But anyway, yeah, it's made for a very active and frenetic start to the year with the portal and guys staying, guys going, and of course still have recruiting to go. Still got February signing day to go.
The transfer portal giveth, the transfer portal taketh away.
That's right.
It does indeed. Is that a Bob Ferranti sighting? Do we have Bobby Buckets joining the show here on Seminole Sidelines? We lose Fish, we get Ferranti. I mean, come on now. Welcome to the show here. Those of you who are listening to this on podcasts, on Apple, Spotify. We are doing this show live, and we will continue to do it live. Got some big news at the end of the show we want to share with you. Bob, a perfect time for you to transition on because we've been talking about who's coming back. We've talked about who's left. And now we talk about next year and what it means. Seems like a lot of people are very high on this FSU team. We've seen some people ranging from extremely optimistic, as I put down below, to Fox Sports, I think, ranking Florida State like 18th. And I was like, okay. That seems a
Ari's already making room for the Sears Trophy.
Yes, I am already. Boys, number 3. If it's a tad too high, that's probably accurate and fair. But, Bob, my question to you, how much better is Florida State going into next year? And just touch on the hype that's going to be this offseason until game 1 against LSU.
I think that's what Mike Norvell and the staff are going to have to fight and keep the players humbled. And nothing humbles you maybe more than that 5 a.m. Alarm on your iPhone, getting you up, getting you moving for those early morning workouts. I think, Pat, we've talked about this. How you handle adversity is one thing. How you handle prosperity is the next step for this program. Coaches will take care of that. I'm really not as worried about it because I think guys are returning because they are self-motivated. They want this team to do well. They want to leave this program better than they found it, to use the Norvell cliche. And this is a program that's got a real shot to win an ACC title. Will they make a playoff? Will they win however many games? We'll see. But I think you're feeling good about just the quality of the depth, the competitive depth that's been felt. I mean, listening to your conversation, you guys discussing who decided to leave because there's not enough balls to go around. Well, we're kind of having I will not say dynasty era discussion, but a competitive discussion where we're moving toward a Florida State team that has more depth at number 1, at number 2, and working toward number 3 at a lot of positions. Not there yet, toward the 90s, not anywhere near it, but climbing toward where I think Mike Norvell would say we have that kind of competitive depth that makes us better in practices, that makes us better on game days, that leads to wins. And that's really all the positives that I think make us very, very excited about the season that's ahead.
Pat and Kurt, thoughts on the hype that's going to be going into next year for Florida State? And I know we're all itching. We wish we could play LSU tomorrow, but we got to wait. We're Florida State heading into next year. Do you like the rankings? What do you think?
Oh, the preseason and already the January 13th preseason rankings. Yeah. Hey,
way too early, as it says below.
I would take it if we were talking a year from now. Yes, I'm good with that. But listen, the shelf life of any one football team is exactly 365 days. To Bob's point, I don't think the coaches are going to allow this team to relax. I do think that we are thinking I think this team is going to be deeper than the last team. I think it's got more talented. The questions to me are, how do you assimilate all these guys together? Team chemistry, all those things. All that will be important to be built this offseason. And as Bob said, it starts with those 5 a.m. wake-up calls when you're going to whatever their version of mat drills is here, in 2013. Listen, it's an exciting time. I cannot remember the last time I've been this excited about going out to a spring practice, and I love spring practice. It's my favorite time to watch football. We're talking about the skill positions, right? But one of my favorite battles is going to be to see what happens on the offensive line, because we're so excited about some of those young kids that we think could push some of these older kids. I don't know that maybe anybody's guaranteed a spot, maybe outside a player or two on the offensive line. So I think there's going to be competition. It's going to be better than we've seen in the past. I think that gets everybody excited. Listen, I think and to go back, this team does seem to enjoy practicing together, being with each other. But yeah, listen, they've beat LSU, Florida, Miami, and Oklahoma, booked in it with LSU and Oklahoma, have a very explosive offense. It's, obviously we saw that there's some improvement to be made on defense against some of your bigger, stronger teams. But it's setting up at face value. If you start looking at the schedule, it's setting up to be where Florida State has a chance to be in the ACC conversation at the end of the year, be it against Clemson, North Carolina State, as they go to non-divisional play. Listen, I'm excited. I think everybody's excited. As you guys well know, I'm a little bit more conservative in my approach to how I project these things out, because somebody is going to surprise us in a good way next year in the ACC, right? I mean, there's going to be a team that's going to be better than what we think they are. And, I use this example as we were talking the other night. We see Duke on the schedule and we think about David Cutcliffe's last two teams which are awful, but I'm not saying that Duke's going to beat Florida State or anything like that. I'm just saying that, sometimes we don't put enough thought and we look at the name and not the substance of what's behind that name. And so, I think I picked, we were working on an article. I think I conservatively said I could easily see 9 wins next year, which is, I don't like to really do all that, but listen, it's exciting. It's exciting. It's going to be an exciting spring and exciting offseason. And I think it's got this fan base back to a fever pitch, and they cannot wait for the August 1st to get here and this team to hit the field.
My only question is, do we need to start tweeting that we think this team's going to go like 7-5 or 6-6? They worked pretty well for Georgia this year. I mean, Kirby somehow coming off a national title had them believing that people actually thought that team was going to go 7-5, which is frankly ridiculous and frankly absurd. So maybe we need to start. I'm not sure they need motivation, but maybe we need to start giving them some. I think that could only help matters.
Yeah. Well, listen, college football is turning into more of the NFL where everyone's right around 6. I mean, how many bowl teams go at 7-5? I mean, 7-5, 6-6. So I don't think that's what's going to happen to Florida State next year. But you're right. We live in a world of parity now in college football outside of the top 4 or 5 teams every year.
That's what I was going to say. That's the important caveat to that. But no, it's more. I mean, if we think they're in need of motivation.
I'm sure Mike Norvell will figure out ways to motivate this football team.
He seems to do that pretty well.
Caught a lot of flack for that tweet back on December 8th.
What did you put?
That there would be a real chance Florida State would be a preseason top 5 team in 2023.
Well, they're not yet.
No, they're not. But I have seen more than 5 different rankings have them in the top 5. And that to me, it just signals the reason I said that was that you got to understand how media types vote, right? They look at recency bias almost always. For whatever reason, how you played in your bowl game sticks in the mind of someone because it's the last image they had of you until they vote again. The players you have coming back, Florida State, check that off the box. Has as many players, if not the most, key players returning in college football next season to their team based on what was on that roster. And then it's projectability, right? Quarterback's an important position to have come back. Jordan Travis isn't just a veteran quarterback. There's some Heisman hype coming from Jordan Travis. So that being said, I know a lot of people were like, Florida State's not going to be ranked top 5. I mean, no, maybe they won't be. And I'm not saying that I agree that FSU should be top 5 in the preseason. I think anywhere from that 6 to 9 range seems adequate for FSU and what they have coming back. And they still have to prove something to you, right? So I think that's in there too. But yeah, I think this Florida State team is going to have as much hype as we can remember going into any season. And that's, coaches say, Pat, you've been a long time, in these rooms. Preseason polls don't really matter.
That's right. Listen, Texas. Listen, the preseason top 22, top 25 in 2022. Just so Texas A&M 5, Oklahoma State 10. Michigan State 12. I mean, those preseason polls can sometimes be misleading. Notre Dame 6. But anyway, yes. Listen, I think maybe this is more validated hype because of what they've done this year and the fact that, like you said, already they got some really good football players coming back. I'm not going to get carried away. Undersell, over deliver.
Right. Yeah, and I think from in a staff room, it doesn't matter, right? Like those players shouldn't be buying the hype. But you know who this does matter to? And from my background and marketing and sales, it matters to Florida State's athletic administration. It matters when you're trying to sell season tickets. It matters when you're trying to get new booster contributions. It matters to recruits, and it gets you in front of the line for a lot of these recruits because all of this is branding. All of this is the image of your program. It matters. Maybe, again, not when the toe meets leather, it doesn't really matter anymore. But it does matter in a lot of different areas, and we would love to see Doak packed every game next season. We'd love to see Florida State fans flood Orlando against LSU. By the way, we're having another tailgate sponsored by Osceola in Orlando. We hope you guys join us there on Labor Day weekend. But I don't think these are meaningless, if that makes sense. I don't think they're completely meaningless when you get high rankings from the media.
No, they're not meaningless. I mean, you're basing those rankings off what you've done the year before, to some extent, and what you've brought in, and they give us all a great starting point, and everyone, we all think we have an idea of who's good and just how good they are. It makes for great conversation, and you're right, Ari. It does impact recruiting, and there's no good press, bad press is all. No press is bad, right? But good press is really good, and when you're talking, it gets the. It kind of puts the flame on that spear. It really is what it does. People are going to be talking about Florida State from now until the LSU game. And listen, I can assure you about 2 minutes into that ball game, neither LSU or Florida State players or coaches are going to be worried about where they're ranked. They're going to be worried about trying to beat each other. And because what's going to matter then is who's ranked after that and where they're ranked. So it'll start taking care of itself out pretty soon, early into the season. But yeah, listen, I have no issue with people being excited about Florida State football for 2023, and the expectations are high. They just won 10 ball games, and so the expectations have been reset. That's what fans are going to expect moving forward, and we will have 12 to 14 games to see how this team responds to that success. And as Bob said, we've seen them handle adversity, and they've handled it well. Coming back from where Mike took over this program and flipping this roster, and going through some tough losses this first season and showing some improvement last year, and then even this year we saw this team showed that it could face adversity, and being down to Oklahoma and several others, and even fighting back to make Clemson and Wake Forest a one-score game at some point in the fourth quarter. We know they can handle adversity. To Bob's point, now can they handle all the talk about how good they are? And you got a Heisman Trophy candidate, and you got a first-round pick back at defensive end, and all those things. And so we'll get to see it. And some people handle adversity better than others, and some people handle success better than others.
Yeah, makes this show a whole lot more fun to do, doesn't it? When there's a higher ranking next to that football.
Well, it gives us a lot to talk about.
It really does, and we will. But I say last couple minutes, what do you guys say? Let's talk some men's and women's hoops here. This show you can expect to touch on not just Florida State football. It will be a predominantly football show because that is what drives the wagon in Tallahassee and for our site and for this fan base. However, there was some other news, and we know you guys are faithful and passionate about all the Seminole sports. And so we're excited to be able to talk. Pat, myself, Kurt, Bob, Jerry, Fish, we'll be talking all Noles sports up until really next football season again. But the men's hoops team, not the season that they've wanted. Kurt, 5-12 on the year. Wake kind of bludgeoned them. Noles couldn't defend, but Baba Miller did make his return, and I think that was a highlight for FSU was getting him back.
I think it will be a highlight. I think it's funny. I mean, he missed 16 games because of suspension. He was finally eligible to return. And then Ham tells us this morning in the pre-interviews before the next game that he was battling tonsillitis and almost didn't play in that game. Like, there was some concern if he was going to be able to return in the first game. He was eligible to return. But, yeah, I think you saw, I mean, some nerves. I think he airballed his first three, which I've seen in practice. And I think Bob has seen as well. He's kind of capable of being effective from that range, and I think FSU believe that to be the case. But I think the inside presence is big. I tweeted, and I think Naheem McLeod liked the tweet after the game. When Baba and Naheem were on the court together, I was like, this really feels like the first time this season that Florida State has looked like traditional Florida State with, like, the length that it likes to have on the court. I mean, the injuries this year have obviously depleted that. And there will be some I think, growing pains for Baba getting thrown into. I mean, getting thrown into ACC play is not easy when not having kind of the warm-up that is non-conference play. And so he's going to get thrown into the deep end a bit. I mean, especially against Virginia this weekend. But the upside is very significant. And now the question becomes, can he make himself the lottery pick that some people think he is in half a season, or will he be back next season?
I think what kind of
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I think what kind of bugged me about the Wake Forest game was just they had battled every game of late, these last, like, let's say 6 or so games they have battled. Even though you're losing at Duke, you're losing at Virginia, they didn't seem to battle as well up at Wake Forest, or a lot of turnovers. They didn't defend the three very well. I like what Baba brings. I think he'll be maybe a better defensive, effective guy than how much we'll see offensive from him. I mean, we'll see rebounds. We may not see a lot of scoring, at least initially, from him. I just thought, Leonard Hamilton was pretty candid this morning, saying it was really a brutal watch to go through that film and to be frustrated with how they played defense, the turnovers. A lot of that's youth. There's still a lot of growing pains, and I think we're just kind of waiting to see how will this team develop. And they've beaten up on some of the worst ACC teams, especially at home. They have struggled to some extent, although being competitive against the better ACC teams. So it's a small body of work against the conference, but how will they finish these last, 14 or so regular season conference games?
Yeah, they couldn't defend against Wake. I mean, they couldn't guard the 3-point line. Wake's a very good 3-point shooting team, and anytime anyone hits 14 triples against you, you're not going to win that game. I mean, it's ridiculous. And Caleb Mills had 2 fouls in the first half and sat for 16 minutes, and really wish Ham would, consider adjusting the 2 foul policy that he has. And I don't want to say that lost the game, but it certainly didn't help because you went down at halftime, down nearly double digits. And at some point that becomes insurmountable. And Caleb had a really nice second half, but Baba coming back is big. I think it adds another body to help Florida State play that system that it wants to defensively and be able to give high energy for longer periods of time. And I think, in this season, you don't want to say it's a lost season because you never know. A team wins at a conference tournament and all of a sudden you're in the big dance. So I'll never say that a season is lost. We've seen crazy things happen. But in a year in which it looks like your overall team goals may not be met, I think now we're starting to look at individual development, right? Some of those freshmen, Chandler Jackson, Tom House, Cam Corrin, I'd like to see those kids start to make the next jump, right? Where the light comes on for them. Baba Miller, want to see him shine and maybe have that big 20-point, 10 rebound performance or something of the nature where you go, that's a first round pick, right? Like that's an NBA prospect. And we'll keep our eyes open for that. And then we want to see some fight and leadership. It's been great, guys. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Matthew Cleveland has evolved into a very good basketball player. That is an NBA type player, and he's starting to show the potential that a lot of people had placed on him when he came to Tallahassee, out of high school as a 5-star recruit. I think it's 6 double-doubles in a row. Am I right?
Yeah. The most in almost 50 years by an FSU player in a row.
Right. And when Cam Fletcher went down with that season-ending knee injury, Cleveland said, I have to take it upon myself to be a little bit more for this team. And he's playing at a high level. I think Caleb Mills has started to play at a much higher level. They've had some good wins. The game against Georgia Tech was a nice win. Beating Notre Dame's a nice win. Beating Virginia would be a nice win. So for me at this point in the season, you're looking at moments. Can players have big moments? Can some of the freshmen evolve and show us progression? And can you win some big games and kind of spoil the seasons of some of these other programs? You'll have some opportunities. And so I can only imagine how hard it's been for Coach Hamilton the last 2 years, and especially this year with the injuries and having all the youth come in this year. But you got to finish the season. You can't just quit. And so I hope Florida State continues to fight. Bob, it should be a good opportunity for Florida State against Virginia. And really historically, FSU has played Virginia very well under Leonard Hamilton.
Yeah, I think I'll be very curious to see how a round 2 against Virginia goes, because now Florida State players who have never faced Virginia, a number of them have never faced Virginia. Now they've seen it, obviously, up there on the road. How will they adjust? I think Leonard Hamilton knows what's coming at them. He was saying Virginia's a very good perimeter shooting team. They dribble drive really well. They're very, very efficient. They are scoring more points than in the past. It's not that kind of ugly, sluggish, 40-point type of Virginia games. But where Florida State will have to find success is in the half-court offense. You will have to be better in those half-court sets you can't have the turnovers. You have to find good shots. We saw a silly shot clock violation the other night where Jalen Worley passed up a 3-pointer with, I think, like 10 seconds to go. The guy was just daring Jalen to take the shot, and he decided not to. We just have to see smart opportunities taken. This has to be a much more efficient team, not just against Virginia, but really moving forward into next week and beyond.
Yeah. Kurt, what are you looking forward to the rest of the season for Florida State? You've covered them. They're going to keep fighting. I think that's Hamilton's DNA. Obviously, they have personnel issues. They don't really have a shot blocker in the middle. Offensively, they've been better. Cleveland's looked good, but where do you go from here?
You go from here, like you said. I think you see how many people's seasons you can spoil. Obviously, in college basketball, there's always the theoretical miracle run in the conference tournament, but I don't think any of us think that they're especially capable of winning 4 or 5 games in as many days like they would have to probably do. But yeah, I'm interested. Can they play that spoiler? Can they be that damaging blow to a lot of teams' resumes? They're going to have a lot of teams right on that bubble. A Clemson, who you've got twice still, NC State, a lot of teams in that threshold. And interested to see what Baba Miller, obviously when not dealing with tonsillitis and as he gets more comfortable this level can do. I'm interested to see how long that Matthew Cleveland streak that you mentioned can go on, because I think it could be sustainable. But you find things like that in seasons like this, and it's kind of been a while. Even last year started with promise before the injuries mounted and became kind of insurmountable for FSU. But I think it's a lot of that, and I think honestly interested to see if Leonard Hamilton maybe learns from some of the missteps and how he uses the portal this offseason as well, I would say.
Yeah. Well, from one side, let's flip to the other side and wrap the show with some women's basketball talk, because Brooke Wyckoff, on the other hand, She's got a monster right now. They're playing at a really high level. They proved it against NC State. Kurt, I know you were in attendance. Bob, you've been covering this team all year. We've got some great articles on our site on just what has fueled Florida State's resurgence in the women's college basketball world. They pounded NC State. And Tania Latson might be the best player in the ACC and is making a push for one of the best 5 players in the country with the way she's playing right now. 6th 30-point game. Kurt, what did you see from the Noles last night at the Tuck against an NC State program that is elite?
I saw a pretty nice bounce back. I mean, Brooke talked a lot about that's what they've done every step of the way. They've responded really well to each of their 3 losses, and this was no different. I mean, even though the film is definitely out there on the Florida State kind of pace and space offense that Bill Ferrara brought in this off season, NC State was knew, I'm sure, what was coming and still didn't seem prepared for it. It felt like a bit of a style mismatch with some of the NC State players, and they just did not have any answers for. I mean, the 3-point shooting, you talked about Tania, and a really nice bounce back for her after she'd had, before that Boston College game, the loss last Sunday, I think 14 straight 20-point games. I think it's the most ever by a freshman in women's basketball, college basketball. And a really nice bounce back for her. Sarah Bajetti's become a really nice player for them. I mean, KK Timpson can be in the offense in particular a really a matchup nightmare of sorts inside. I mean, I think she's got 10 double-doubles. They've just, I mean, it is a lot of fun to watch. And frankly, I think that can be a big deal in women's basketball. I think when it's a struggle to sometimes get people to go, especially in droves like they do for even I mean, it's not surprising, but it's maybe a bit unfortunate that the men's team and what they've done this year consistently has better crowds than that women's team, because they are a lot of fun to watch. And I mean, I think they have the potential to be to host NCAA regional. I think they're in that range, absolutely. And yeah, it's impressive what they did too, an NC State team that, I mean, they haven't beaten, I feel like, in a minute.
No, since 2019, they hadn't beaten them. And NC State's a Final Four caliber program. They just made a Final Four recently, and Westmore's got a good team. Bob, you've been covering this program from Sue Summerall to Brooke Wyckoff. Is this Florida State team being slept on?
Yeah, I think people are asking, why are they not ranked? And I think in part it's hard when you are not ranked to get into the top 25. And then when you have a loss at Boston College, they didn't get ranked this week. Now, this is a win that gets a lot of attention. And we saw on social media Thursday night, it was all over the place. ESPN was tweeting out Sarah Bajetti's shot from the logo. And then the ACC Network and the FSU women's basketball account is putting out, tweets and video highlights. This gets attention for the program. I think to Kurt's point, we've all kind of talked through the years, how do you get more people out to women's basketball? A really fun, entertaining brand of basketball for let's be honest, the not traditional basketball fan. If you just want to go out and have a fun night with the family, go. This is a fun night because you're going to see way cheaper than a movie ticket, way cheaper than a Netflix subscription. You're going out there and you're seeing, like you said, Aria, arguably the best women's basketball player in the conference, up there with Kitley at Virginia Tech. I mean, some really good ball players on this team. It's not just Tania, but it's well worth your time to watch. And if you've missed them, go to YouTube, watch some condensed games, kind of learn a little bit about this team, read some of Kurt's stories, and just kind of get immersed in what they're doing and how things are changing, because this is a fun opportunity for you to kind of jump on that bandwagon now. You got a game on Sunday against Louisville. You get to see Morgan Jones return to Tallahassee. I'm sure that'll be another emotional game, but it's a fun team to watch. I think that's the bottom line. Is they're great. They're exciting. Who knows where they will go, but I think, could they host a regional? Very much. They're in good position right now, I think, to do just that.
They played at a high level, and folks, Tania Latson is the truth. Nobody can stop her. It's incredible to watch. And as a freshman, that's what's been even most impressive, is not just that she is this level, it's that she's doing it as a freshman. And so your next opportunity right there, Louisville, perennial power, Final Four caliber program. They're in Tallahassee. It's always been a good matchup against the Noles. FSU has had some top 5 wins against Louisville on their home court recently. Some thrilling postseason wins against Louisville, especially in the ACC tournament. And so come on out. Come watch this FSU basketball team, 16-3 on the year, and they are making believers out of a lot of folks. All right, I think, guys, that's a really good, wholesome show, right? All the way around, thorough, in-depth, and want to thank all of you for joining us here live on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. We do want to turn your attention to a show that we're planning here, Seminole Sidelines Weekly, and we'd like to have it 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It'll be a variation of the whole staff chipping in to tell you all about Noles sports, not just football, but basketball, baseball, and softball. We know you love those. Link Jarrett's first season coming. Lonnie Alameda's got a powerhouse over at Joanne Graff Field. And who knows, maybe we'll have some other sports join us as well and continue to highlight and cover Florida State's great athletics programs. Really one of the best athletics programs in the country, men's, women's. And fellas, Pat, we're looking forward to this thing 3 times a week. It should be a ton of fun.
Well, we got enough people. I think we can keep. I think we can keep it covered. We got plenty of talkers, so we'll have a lot of information for a lot of people. Obviously, a lot of spring sports, baseball starting, softball starting, with basketball and women's basketball reaching its playoff time, and of course, football never ends. So yeah, it's gonna be a great time.
Spring football will be here before we know it.
It will be. You're right about that.
Like less than 2 months, as crazy as that is.
Yeah, Bob, this would be a good opportunity for us and a chance to get Seminole fans a multi-week show to be able to give them all their Noles coverage and sports. And maybe lunchtime, you pop on with the Osceola and hang out with us.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about this concept for a while, but, it's a good time for you to take a break, have lunch, listen to us, put your comments on YouTube, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. If you can't watch us live, we'll listen to the podcast. We'll drop it on Apple and Spotify and all the major platforms. We would appreciate it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Osceola, or check us out on your favorite podcast platform. That way you won't miss a show. You'll get alerts and notifications so that you can keep up with us, whether you're live or, kind of listening or watching it as you do other things throughout your day.
All right. Our goal will be about an hour each episode a week. 3 times a week, and we'll talk all those sports, maybe have some interviews as well with coaches and athletes, administrators here on Seminole Sidelines. Appreciate you guys joining us. Charles Fishbein, appreciate you. Pat Burnham, Kurt Weiler, Bob Ferranti. This has been the Osceola. Make sure to check out our site, subscribe to our website, and we got you covered better than anybody else. And appreciate you. Spotify, podcasts on Apple, and on YouTube, you can rewatch this thing as well. So until we talk to you next week, 12:30 Monday, I'm Ari Masudi saying thanks for watching.